They thought she was lucky. They thought she had everything: wealth, security, a name that opened every door. But what they didn't see was the girl behind the smile. The girl who was caged by her own last name. The politician's daughter, who was about to prove that she was more than a title. She was more than a shadow. She was her own storm. This is the magnet moment. The audience leans in, wondering what storm. What's her story? She grew up in a mansion where the walls had ears. Guards followed her everywhere. Every time she laughed too loud, smiled too wide, or frowned too deeply, someone whispered, "Be careful, your father's reputation is on the line." At school, kids didn't see her as a person. They saw her as the politician's daughter. They assumed she was spoiled, entitled, untouchable. She envied the normal girls, walking to school alone, eating street food, holding hands with friends without the cameras flashing. Her life was polished, but not free. "I felt like a mannequin in a showroom," she would later say. Perfect on the outside, hollow on the inside. By the time she turned 18, her father had already decided her future. "You'll study law, join my campaigns, and one day you'll take over the family legacy." But her heart whispered a different dream: journalism. She wanted to write, to tell stories of ordinary women, of unheard voices. When she resisted, her father's tone turned cold. "This is not a choice, it's your duty." At public events, reporters never asked her opinion. They asked, "What does your father think about this policy?" At parties, young men looked at her with curiosity, not respect. How does it feel to be his daughter? No one ever asked, "Ooh, or why you?" She started to believe the whispers. Maybe she was just a shadow. The breaking point came during a national debate contest. She had entered to prove herself. The crowd expected perfection. After all, she was a politician's daughter. But on stage, her hands shook, her throat closed, and the words wouldn't come. The room erupted in laughter. Headlines the next morning read, "Politician's daughter fails to speak." That night, she locked herself in her room, tears soaking her pillow. She thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I'll never be anything more than his daughter. But as dawn broke, another voice rose inside her. "No. They will not define me. I will." She picked up her pen. She began writing, raw, unfiltered, under a secret name. Her anonymous articles spread online. They weren't polished speeches. They were fire. They spoke of corruption, of women silenced in boardrooms, of mothers raising children alone, of girls denied education. People connected with her words. They said, "Whoever writes this understands our pain. Whoever writes this has courage." One article, about women being told to shrink their dreams, went viral. TV anchors quoted it. Panels debated it. People demanded to meet the mysterious writer. When she revealed herself, the world gasped. The politician's daughter wrote this. But this time, there was no laughter, there was silence. Respectful silence. Then applause. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. With her own voice, she built her own path. She launched campaigns for women's education. She traveled to villages her father had never visited. She stood on stages, not as an extension of him, but as her own force. Reporters no longer asked, "What does your father think?" They asked, "What do you believe?" Years later, she stood at a podium filled with young women cheering her name. And with tears in her eyes, she whispered, "I was once just the politician's daughter. Today, I am a woman who writes her own destiny. And so can you." The crowd roared. And in that roar, she knew the shadow was gone. She was the light. Key women's life themes in the story: identity, struggle of women defined by family names, husbands, fathers, voice finding her own truth through writing, empowerment turning humiliation into fire, inspiration, showing other women they can break free from shadows,